everybody? Welcome to another episode of the James Loud Podcast. And today our special guest is Alec, one of the co-founders of SC Labs. How are you doing today?
Wonderful. Yeah, really appreciate you having me by. It's awesome.
For sure. So yeah, we met at CannaFest. I think we met at CannaFest last year. I've known of you. I've known of SC Labs forever. We use SC Labs. We're big fans of your guys' work. The consistency, I feel like you guys kind of set the bar as far as labs go. So yeah, so thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you. That means a lot coming from you. A lot of respect for your work, and yeah, really excited to get into this.
Yeah, totally. So how did you get started with all this stuff with cannabis and then going from there to SC Labs?
Kind of a random story, actually. So I'm originally from Roswell, New Mexico. And I joined the Navy to get out of Roswell when I was 18 years old back in 2001. And I was on submarines for 5 years in the Navy. I got out of the Navy in Virginia Beach, where I was a local drunkard at this bar called Peabody's in Virginia Beach, where I met this fateful, incredible woman named Taylor Blake. And Taylor Blake, ultimately, she and I started dating, moved out of California together. Because she's originally from Santa Cruz. Yeah. And, we had a shared goal of moving out of California together, and we were together for like 5.5 years. And little did I know she was kind of the most, fateful, incredible person I've ever met in my life.
Yeah.
To help me to find my way, in with the cannabis plant. And
this is like Tim Blake's daughter,
yeah,
Taylor
totally,
Blake. Yeah, totally.
So
big shout out to Tim and Taylor.
Biggest shout out. They're two of the most influential people in my life, to be honest.
Wow.
So Taylor kind of was my connection to Santa Cruz. And, when we moved to Santa Cruz, we're having a hard time finding, back in 2007, we're having a hard time finding jobs and a place to live. And her dad heard we were in town. And so Tim called Taylor one day and was like, hey, I hear you're having a hard time getting roots. He's like, you should come up here and come through Ganja boot camp for the year, and it was funny because when we moved up there, one of my biggest goals was to learn how to roll a joint. Yeah. That's kind of how shallow my thinking was at the time of, how influential this connection would be to my life.
Right.
And so ended up moving up there, and, that year he was real sick with cancer, and, he was getting flown by camp every day, and, it spooked his kind of main farmhands who ended up bouncing. And so Taylor and I basically had to step up and get the full download, and, each plant, 100 plant full sun outdoor back in 2007.
Right.
And 99 plant,
totally.
Per parcel kind of thing, and so that, we did that, changed my life forever. Really connected me with the spirit of the plant and cultivating this plant, and my love and passion for it. And we ended up leaving there that year after harvest and moved to Santa Cruz, got some roots in Santa Cruz. And it was there where, we were going to Cabrillo College. We started, she was working at Macy's makeup counter. I was working at Santa Cruz Hydroponics and Organics under the tutelage of another very big mentor in my life, Eric Shedlarski, this dude named Shed. But anyway, I just skipped over a part of it because Tim Blake, I could give the ultimate credit to him. He became my born again weed dad.
Yeah.
Taught me how to live and be organic, not put chemicals in or on my body. He shared all my first psychedelic experiences with me. So really his man was influential and just the man I've become. Yeah.
He's one of the best guys out there.
Yeah.
Literally. Totally. Yeah. I got a lot of respect for Tim. Yeah. And you coming from Roswell, it makes perfect sense.
Totally. Yeah. It's actually really fateful.
Yeah.
Yeah. When we moved up there and saw the UFO on his billboard for Area 101, it just, it's like, oh man, it's going to be an interesting summer.
I bet. Yeah, I bet it was a wild summer.
Yeah. And so anyway, I was working at the hydro shop. Taylor was working at makeup counter. I had a little indoor growing in Santa Cruz in a garage, and Taylor and this other girl, Leah, started becoming good friends, and they could tell each other their boyfriends were growing weed, and they wanted to do a weed play date. Connected me with this dude named Josh Werzer, who ultimately became my partner in SC Labs. And so the Blake family, Taylor Blake particularly, was the ultimate dot connector for all my progression in my life over the last 20 years in cannabis.
Wow.
One day we were hanging out at a bar, and my buddy Josh, he was kind of, a little drunk. He was kind of cogging off about, just how he thought he could do way better this job that he had just taken. He had a few months before applied for a Craigslist post to become a lab director for the first testing lab in the nation, Steep Hill in Oakland.
Yeah.
And so he was doing that for a few months. And, he just thought he wanted to take a very science approach.
Yep.
And so, one day whenever we're at this bar, he was kind of just like, like I said, cocking off about how he thought he could do it better. And so that kind of just sat in my mind. And then, I was blessed in a way to be able to connect dots between him and then who became my other partners, Jeff Gray and Ian Rice.
Yeah.
And then we came together, it was kind of around this time, like a few weeks ago in 2009.
Yeah.
We came up with the idea. We filed our articles of incorporation after one meeting.
Wow.
15 years later, here we are.
Super early. Yeah. Super early on, the Halent steep hill coming from UC Davis and then over with, Reggie Gaudino. I mean, all this stuff was legendary, working with Harborside and then evolving to what it is today with you guys. And it's like, it's pretty amazing how far testing has come, but also how far it still needs to go as far as standards across the U.S.
Totally. Yeah, couldn't agree more. It started in such a time where cannabis was never tested.
Right.
And I remember at first I'd go into spots talking about testing and people would kind of like laugh me out of retail.
Well, it was tested. I was a tester. I tested it.
Totally.
Yeah, but it wasn't tested.
I'd go in like, somebody that's normally buying weed one directionally.
Right.
And kind of trying to get them to give me a couple grams of weed and some money and I'm going to give them a piece of paper back.
Sure.
So for early on it was funny just because there was, but slowly we just started to see over time kind of people starting to see the intrinsic marketing value.
Yeah. Well, dispensaries really start, the Bay Area, especially like PCC in Berkeley. They were one of the early ones
the
too.
Midnight.
Yeah.
I remember that.
The Midnight, that was a GDP times OG Kush.
Yeah. That was my favorite all time to this day.
Yeah. I mean, shout out Eric and Dave, by the way.
Yeah. Eric and Dave, those guys. Yeah. I know L Rock is my connection to that. He was connected to those guys back in the day. But that was still to this day one of my favorite all time strains. But
I used to vend there. I used to vend there a long time ago.
Nice.
A long time ago. But yeah, and they had the best quality. I feel like the best quality in the Bay. Harborside also had amazing quality at times, right? But they had something for everybody. So literally Harborside had top shelf, the middle, the bottom, whatever you needed, they had that. And if you wanted a massage, they'd give you a massage.
Yeah. Medical days, it was pretty incredible glory era in the whole game, and it's crazy to see how far it's come, how far it needs to go, how much, kind of really screwed up kind of, I think on the state regulators parts, but you see the way testing came in because, testing went from there's no need or value. And the people that would adopt it were those that were trying to really be way ahead of the game, wanted to demonstrate their product was superior, to show that they're, organic and not spraying, these anti-life nerve agents from World War II on their plants, and that are the modern pesticides of the future, that have been used now and decimated so much of the agricultural lands of the nation.
Well, it wasn't all about THC percentage in the beginning. Totally. Like that was, the stuff that people would still buy stuff that tested 14, 15%, and loved it and absolutely loved it because some of the best stuff tests around 20%, sometimes less, sometimes a little more, but like we weren't seeing 30% tests back then.
Totally. Well, it's really fascinating because, the whole potency conversation is like such a bane of our existence, know, but it's also, can see how it came about, right? Yeah. And also how we had a part to play in it, just as a laboratory, right? Because like real early on, when we opened, we had a real blessed connection for a few years with Weed Maps. Yeah. Had fatefully kind of was connected to Justin Hartfield and Doug Francis from Weed Maps back in 2011 or 12. And kind of pitched them on integrating testing onto the Weed Map menus to be able to help kind of, demonstrate products that's tested, to be able to differentiate on menus. And, and so that kind of almost started the moment of the potency arms race. Yeah. Because then like retailers were, they'd test like find of 10 strains, the highest one, and then put that like 10 times on Weed Maps, named 10 different things, Sure. And it just began the moment of like hyper fraudulence too, of using a number to kind of just like get one over on folks. Right. But but even when we opened back in 2010, certain strains we've seen, like Banana OG is the greatest example comes to mind, the Oregon Kid Banana Cut, It's like that since we opened in 2010, because that was a strain that, I used to grow back in the day when I was still growing, and a lot of people in Santa Cruz have grown for decades, and
I got my cut from Santa Cruz for the banana OG for sure.
Holy, yeah. And so when that cut, like when you grow it immaculately and you test a top bud, you could hit 35, 36% THCA, right? Now, whether or not every bud in the plant tests that, that more, from what I've learned over 15 years of testing, that more largely has to do with canopy management and leafing at the right times to, kind of standardize cannabinoid content from tops to middles to bottoms. Cause what happened is, but potency is not the only thing. Right. And I think that's, cause I don't want to get, off track with that, cause to your point, strains 15 to 20%, some of the best herb you've ever smoked in your life.
Some of the strongest stuff, too, especially some of the African varieties that are testing lower, they can be way stronger.
Well, yeah. And that's what's really crazy too, because we've seen there's the higher something is in cannabinoids doesn't correlate to higher in terpenes too. Oftentimes it's more capped in terpene content. And, we see a lot of the strains that are breaking 30%, maxing out at like 2.5% terps, right? At best case scenario, if it was grown perfectly and all the terps remained, that'd be close to a 10-to-1 cannab to terp ratio. Yeah. Right. A lot of these strains that are in the 20 to 30 range, they might not be as high in cannabinoids, but they could put out 5% terps. Like you see a lot of the strains that have won the Emerald Cups and the California State Fairs over the years. It's like that top, because across hundreds of thousands of terpene tests that we've done over the years, we see the average terpene content in dried flower is about 1.4%.
Yeah.
Whereas the potential one is most sticky, cured, chronic. You could stick it to a window, 3 to 5.5%.
Yeah.
Right. The average herb on retail shelves in the flood, like right now, anywhere in California, like 1% or less.
Wow.
The average pre-roll on the shelf, by the time it's tested, 0.5%.
It's insane.
It's insane.
Yeah.
Right. So, and when you start thinking about things in terms of cannab to terp ratio, right? Like you could have a strain 20% dried, harvested, like cold, dried, cured, preserved, cold, kept cold, throughout the entire supply chain, like produce.
How it should be.
Like, how it should be.
Totally.
We treat cabbage better than we treat cannabis, but if we treat it like cabbage with a cold refrigerated supply chain, transportation, minimizing fluctuations in temperature, humidity, it's mind blowing how long the terps can retain and remain. And the herb just gets better,
Yeah, literally about 20, 25 years ago, the beer industry figured that out, right? Because before
that's when the craft industry blew up.
Yeah, we can blame Tony McGee and we can blame Russian River Brewing Company and a handful of other people. Jeremy and Tony McGee were the ones who really figured it out from Lagunitas. Right. But there's a handful of other people that, adopted it pretty early on. And then
the terp preservation on the hops.
Right? Yeah. It's very similar. Right.
Totally.
I mean, and it should be a wake up call to everybody. Cause it's we're so behind. And some people are aware of it, but it's like, you have to work with the distributors that are aware of it. Just because you're aware of it.
Oh, totally.
How does it get distributed?
The distributor.
And then also the
retail.
Those
are the people where you're losing most of your value in their hands. And then they're trying to come back to you to renegotiate price because they lost 70% of the value in their hands. Yeah. Because we see 60, 80% of the terps are gone in the 30, 45 day window. It takes the average herb when it's bombed to make it to retail shelves. And it's all that time just being stepped on, not literally, but if it's just sitting there at room temperature for 10 days, it's you're not doing anybody a service. Yeah. And just real quick to that point too of what you were saying, because that 20% example, that's 5% terps, 4-to-1 cannab to terp ratio. That's the loudest, most delicious, flavored, aromatic kind of. If you smoke that, there's a terp ring halo on it all the way down to the bottom.
Skittles right there. You're describing Skittles, right? And Skittles grown correctly hits those numbers for sure. I'm going to guess that with pre-rolls, especially a lot of people are using blenders to blend up they're using Ninjas or Vitamixes to blend up their flour rather than milling it.
Heat
So the heat, right? So the friction and the heat, you're disrupting the trichomes, right? So you're killing the terps off. My belief is that if you mill it with a flour mill, Green Bros makes a good one at scale as well. And I think Flour Mill is coming out where you're milling it. I believe you're going to get a better product that's going to have more terpenes in the end.
Right. Yeah. There's certain pre-roll machines that people buy where it heats it so it can get it to a certain level of dryness. Yeah. So it can kind of pack the cones. Right. And you're devaluing by the second, the herb that you pay so much for to pack into this super cheap little cone, and that's, and because it's all, not only about removing the heat in the grind process, but it's also like, what is the ambient temperature of the room that you're grinding the herb in?
So
if you're doing anything like if you're doing it in the low 60s, good on you. Right. If you're doing it like mid to high, anything 70s, higher,
80s,
it's like
you're
fucked. You know, just by grinding it, you might lose 30% terps off the top, you know?
Right. And we were learning all this stuff. We got a Roll Pros machine that basically does 900 joints an hour with my cultivation partners in the city. And we're like going over every little detail. We're analyzing every little piece, right? And it's like the difference in the way you grind it, the difference in the room temperature, also the difference in the room temperature, how it rolls, right? But then also the flow. There's all these little details on creating the perfect experience. And we're investigating every single last detail. The guys from SF Canada, my partner over there, is like, he's really into it. And he goes down the rabbit hole with stuff and is like, you know, we're using temperature guns on the grinding plate to see what the temperature is from start and then the friction that it causes. And we're not using a Ninja blender. You know what I mean? I think those things are important.
Well, I think that's you know, because you nailed something about the craft beer industry, right? Because you know, with cannabis, the prohibition of cannabis has ended, right? And comparing it to alcohol, right? When the prohibition of alcohol ended, there was like an 80-year consolidation among a few families, a few corporations.
The big four, right? It was the big four.
Until the 80s when these dudes figured something out. They cracked the code. They figured out how to define craft.
I remember the beer in the 80s. It was like, there was Sierra Nevada had their thing going. There was like Red Hook.
Yeah, totally.
And I don't really remember who else was there. There was like a handful of others.
And kind of East, that's more East Coast. But
right. But as far as like microbrewery, craft brewery, there wasn't a lot, right? It was very, very small amount. And then all of a sudden it blew up in the 90s. Portland. It went crazy. That was like the epicenter. I was born in Portland.
Oh, cool.
That place blew up. With beer,
Yeah. Well, and that's, you know, because that's my big prayer, is that it doesn't take 80 years for the cannabis industry to internally help define for themselves and the future consumer, like what craft is.
Well, we already have the variety, right? We already have the variety. Totally. So I feel like the fact that we already have all this variety helps. And, you know, I think the big four in cannabis would love to be the big four and do that, but I don't think it's possible. We're not going to be able to get rid of all the craft brands. Totally. The consolidation will happen, but to a different degree. And there's still connoisseurs that want quality. And the only way they're going to get quality is from craft grown products. It's not going to be grown at scale. Just like wine, you know, and even beer.
Most consumers kind of that are buying top shelf herb at retailers, you know, for one, I feel like are kind of outraged because they can't find any of that sticky chronic that you used to be able to find occasionally at retailers in the medical days. And I feel like there's no brand loyalty because people just go brand to brand to brand, trying to find something with a little flavor and soul to it, you know, the terp presence, right? Like, because again, I think so much of this correlates to, you know, terps. Everybody's so focused on THC as though, you know, like, because everybody, it's like almost like an hourglass, right? It's like everybody at the middle of the hourglass up, closest to the plant, farming, everything like that, all knows and has always known the terp, you know, the THC percentage means nothing. Yeah. Right. And like, you know, it's like you can, you know, if you have some felony weed that you crack a jar and it bombs the neighborhood, you know, just with the you know, if you got double turkey bag, it's still kind of like seeping through, you know, it's like that, you know, anybody, you know, I mean, that's the universal, you know, terps, like, I've heard them described as universal love language in nature, you know, and it's like just the nose and how much the association of smell, flavor kind of like correlate to experience. And, you know, and it's just so sad to see because once you're at the middle of the hourglass of the distributor down to the retailers to the consumers, it's like it's all THC, you know, and like you got all the distributor procurement directors buying off spreadsheets with THC percentages and strain names. And typically the THC percentages have been over the last 5 years hyperinflated by fraudulent lab, hyper lab fraudulence that's finally getting cracked down by the state. Earlier
this year, there was a big crackdown, which was good. And I think it's necessary. I think those things are necessary. And I talk about on the show about I'm not that big on government oversight on a lot of things, but testing labs is like one of those things that the customer then wins because the person who loses at the end of this is the customer, right? Totally. The lab gets the business if the numbers are higher. The grow or the cultivator, they get the sale, and then it goes down to the customer, and the customer loses because they get an inferior product to what they thought it was, right?
Totally.
And so,
no, that's exactly right. You know, and I think you know, ultimately the state put in place testing before product makes it to shelves to optimize public health and safety, right? To put in these safeguards. And I think, and from what I've learned from testing, it's like those safeguards are important and necessary, right? Like, because so many practices people used to do just indiscriminately, like dropping bug bombs every harvest in between runs, just building up into the drywall and sheetrock, getting toxic levels, that are just off gassing through the heat
through future cycles,
through future cycles for years, and all the employees are in there just huffing it. It's like, that's all bad, and you see the levels showing up in those. People had to, in the flip to rate legalization, people had to rebuild their entire rooms, right? And change their
change their
building materials.
And their HVAC systems need to be replaced. Like literally, I saw some COAs that came back dirty from a place I thought had clean stuff. And it was really kind of mind boggling. And then I was talking to the cultivator and he was like, yeah, we hadn't used that stuff in 7 years, right? And it was
like chlorophenopyr, like pylon.
It was pylon.
Dude, that's the number one,
Dude, like literally pylon that hadn't been used in 7 years still showed up on a test from a facility. And it's like, getting rid of pylon is a very difficult thing. It's not easy for one thing, but so you use the wrong thing in your cultivation, you can be screwed for years and years.
And so many well-intentioned farmers, like when I worked at the hydro shop before we opened the lab, I mean, I saw people come in at this point of crisis where they had like webbed colas with spider mites.
Right.
Week 4 of flower, they fucked up. They didn't do their preventative work. And so now they're facing this gnarly consequence.
Sure.
And I remember seeing people coming in that I could see there's two types of people at that moment. People like, cause you're like, dude, you don't have a whole lot of options. You got to pull out the vacuum cleaners and, like pray, like pull off every leaf off the plant, like, you soap and water and like, good luck.
Just killing the terps. And then there's
the other people that would, exactly. This other group of people would be like, all right, cool story. Give me everything you got behind the counter. And they would, out of over freaking out, they would spray Avid, Eagle 20 and Floramite, or maybe a little Forbidden there too.
Forbid Avid and Judo, like
people would
whatever,
like
all that
combine
stuff
and then
so
spray
bad.
in week 5 of flower, and they wouldn't even smoke their own weed.
Yeah, of course.
It was just selling for the highest price to whoever would buy it. Right.
It's disgusting.
And I think that shows kind of two, there's people in the pure pursuit of money and profit, and there's people in it, to grow this incredible herb that has so much healing to bring the world, that individuals across the world are consuming and getting, right from, and so.
We try not to spray anything. If at all possible, we don't spray during flower. I feel like it affects the terps. And there's some companies in metric, these are metric licensed companies, California, Washington, other states, that spray throughout the flower cycle to prevent bugs. And these are large facilities, right? And so they can legally spray because this stuff is
and stuff. You shouldn't spray that like late into flower. And there's
and it's not going to test things. Some of these things won't even test dirty. They're OMRI certified, but they're not supposed to be used like they're being used.
Not at all.
And people are consuming this stuff, and it's like,
and I know Ethan Russo's been doing a lot of work to kind of like show the connection to like cannabis hyperemesis syndrome to like certain genetic traits, but there's.
Even neem, right? Neem's a bad one.
Well, there's a lot of correlation to neem use late into flower, residuals maintaining or creating these, what in India is known as neem oil poisoning, all the exact kind of symptoms, And so it's like, and I know people that have actually reversed cannabis hyperemesis syndrome through changing the practices kind of around the herb that, what they're spraying and all that. So, I mean, I'm not, but that's also just like an N of one. I know Ethan Russo is doing a much bigger project kind of to show it's somehow connected to genetic, but your point's right. It's like, you shouldn't be spraying just because it's organic or OMRI listed or it's labeled to be able to be used up to day of harvest on spinach. Yeah. This is a sticky resinous plant.
We're not smoking spinach.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's, you're not washing anything off of the flower.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's a big, I feel very responsible for the work that we do in testing cannabis. We really pride ourselves in, over the last 15 years building what, we're trying to be the leader in what we do. And our whole goal is to kind of be above reproach and to keep those that we serve above reproach. Because we've just seen the devastation that can happen with brands and recalls and public, public relations damage to brands because of recalls and all these different things. And we've just seen all the nightmare stories of how labs set clients up for failure, and one of those ways that a lot of labs historically have set clients up for failure is giving them whatever number they wanted. Yeah. Because that made it really difficult for us to survive because, whenever these labs are all known to give like 10 percentage points higher than anything we're going to give, people are running around. There's a point, it sucks because it's conditioned the market in such a negative way to where people created these unrealistic expectations for what flower actually is or tests.
Right.
And so kind of one of our big things is like we consider ourselves like less of a fee for service testing arrangement, more of a partner in solutions. And from our historic insight and experience over hundreds of thousands of tests over the last 15 years, we have a lot of insight into the ins and outs of the how, what, where, why, whens around how any fail could come about and how to avoid it. Because we have, I'm part of our technical services team where, we do a lot of deep like root cause analysis, whenever people fail. Cause, we learned early on in 2018, when somebody fails a test, that could be the end of the relationship. You can't auto email somebody that bad news.
No.
It's like that requires one of the founders of the company to follow up immediately, to engage, to demonstrate how seriously we take a fail, all the repreps and reproducible data points we generate to kind of confirm a fail before we ever release it, because we know the consequence is you might have to remediate or destroy hundreds of thousands of dollars of product, right? And so once we kind of go through this demonstration, we try to shift these fails scenarios into root cause kind of investigations where, over hundreds of these over the last, since 2018, we've really learned the how, what, where, why, when any type of fail can come about. And our whole goal now is to help empower those that we serve with this awareness before the fails ever come about. Right. Because, we're not in the business of failing people. And if somebody's failing, that we're failing, in a way. And, and that also comes with the topic of potency, because everybody has to be so hyper competitive in the world of potency, because of how much that, even though that doesn't matter, like I always tell people, it's like you have to participate in the potency game.
Right.
But there's a way to transcend that game. And that's, in my opinion, kind of terpene preservation, cold chain, really monitoring those things and finding the right partners. So where your herb can be delivered to shelves is like 300% more sticky and stinky than anything else on the shelf. Totally. Right? That's the way to preserve your craft designation, even though the market can't yet appreciate that.
Yeah.
Even though it's starting to, but with potency, we've done, it's been actually really fascinating, because we've done, dozens at this point of these experiments with groups that are furious about their potency. Yeah. Like going back to that banana, when 2018 came in and, all of a sudden people weren't cherry picking buds, top buds, right? Sending that in, representing their entire harvest as that number. Sure. Now that we're collecting like a representative sample, right? Collecting smalls, middles, tops, kind of just
homogenizing it,
testing it, right? All of a sudden, a lot of people's banana, a lot of my friends' banana was in the mid to low 20s, and so they're furious, whenever historically they were like testing a top bud and it was like 33 or 36.
Sure.
THCA, right? And so a lot of people, kind of were reading us the riot act, and they were like trying to bounce, and like a lot of people left us and never came back, to go just get their ego stroked and to get that number that they believe they deserve, but they didn't learn the critical thing, right? And that's kind of what we've been helping, some of the greatest relationships we've now cultivated in the world of cultivation are, have been helping to people to like internally understand how critical leafing at the right times throughout flower matters towards standardizing the cannabinoid content of what a plant can produce.
Right. And
we've done this experiment side by side, like, because what I've learned is like most farmers kind of have a half-assed lazy farmer prune.
Yeah.
That they perform. It's like removing way too much leaf way too late into flower. And as a result, everything below that's been shaded the whole time has variance in substantial ways, right? And we've seen, a lot of people, they could have the 30 up top, but they got like a 15 on the bottom, and the average
there's no
now
light penetration.
There's no light penetration. So now your average on a compliance test is like 22.
Yeah.
Right. Even though your genetic has the potential to test 30.
Well,
right?
they also have come out with under canopy lighting. And under canopy, like we use Favens, and they're a game changer. I mean, like literally Favens for even seed production is a game changer. Totally. You're getting better yields with everything. Right. Well, because that's what we've, because that definitely helped change the game. Yeah. But still, ensuring your canopy is not, because if you like strip your plants like within the first day or two or three of flower, and then you strip them again day 21, and then you strip them again day 56. Yeah. The plants, like, as the flower sites are all going to develop, they all are getting the same amount of light. So they're all starting to develop at the same rate. And then the leaf is kept off through the critical points of development and maturing. Yeah.
And so when you do that and your all buds are kind of getting the same amount of light, it's crazy how all buds look like top buds.
Right. All of a sudden,
and your yield goes up, and exactly. Your yield goes up, your extraction yield per plant goes up, your cannabinoid content standardizes, because we've seen when people have an optimal canopy management process, methodical at like the right times throughout flower, they can get if your strain is 30%, you know, or 20%, whatever the number, because 30% doesn't matter. I just mean, it's like if you have whatever the top bud percentage is, it's like if you have the optimal canopy management that you do throughout, you can get the relative percent difference to 5%.
Yeah.
So you can be 30 plus or minus 1.5%. Guess what? Your cannabinoid content on a compliance test is hitting what the top bud tests.
Yeah.
Right. And so our whole thing is like, you don't want to work with a lab that's just giving you the number that you want or giving you passing results,
you want
even though you have aspergillus in your facility.
Yeah, 100%.
Because low key, you're incubating a bigger issue that's to come. You're not staying hyper competitive, like learning these critical things around the correlation to leafing and increasing potency. You know, more, you know, if somebody can do more internally by leaving at the right times, then, you know, trying to find a couple percent higher from this lab or that.
Yeah.
You know, and so yeah, our whole goal kind of there is to, you know, help empower those we serve to stay way ahead in the competitive, you know, way of potency, but less focused on that and more on like, what are you doing to preserve your terps? Yeah. Like, what are your partners doing? Because, you know, a lot of my closest friends, you know, they you know, I don't want to name the names, but some big distributor, like alcohol folks in kind of Santa Rosa that like took on like hundreds of thousands of dollars of product from all kinds of different farmers and then had it sitting in a warehouse for 6 months in the Santa Rosa summer.
Yeah.
And like they had to go like 6 months later to renegotiate price and like, you know, basically settle on like a fraction of the profit they agreed on because of how lacking the distributor was on, you know, caring for the product. Right. And so,
well, let's talk about that for a little bit as far as cold storage. But let's take a couple steps back. We're going to talk about drying and curing. Yeah. And your opinion on drying and curing.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, slow, obviously. Right. Yeah. And I think cold harvesting, right. Yeah. It's like, you know, people like when you imagine harvesting plants in the, you know, 100-degree Lake County daytime. Yeah. Right.
In the middle of this day, during the sunniest day. Yeah. That's crazy.
Well, because there's this whole like big download that the wine industry like learned, you know, decades ago. And the decades of agronomy went into studying when's the right time to harvest wine grapes for making wine.
They measure bricks, right? And so like literally they're measuring bricks and it's cultivar specific with the grapes. But
they all harvest at night. They don't like at a certain point in the morning when the Kelvin cycle kind of concludes. Yeah. Like they have like videos, microscope videos now of like all the pores in the plant opening up and like almost like respiring, off gassing. Yeah. A buildup of terps that happened, you know, like through the night. Well, or through the day from like the getting blasted and off gassing terps and then recharging. And then at some point in the morning, it kind of like off gasses, gives way for the sun again. Right. So I think that's a big part. It's like, for one, it's like, you know, cause you know, from the time of harvest all the way through to the point where it's at the retailer, it's only a loss. Yeah. Unless you're doing all you can to preserve. Right. And so it's like, yeah, and that includes, are you harvesting cold or are you harvesting in the peak heat hours of the day? Right. And, and everything's different because like peppers, you want to harvest in the heat, the hottest part of the day because the capsaicin's the highest. So if you're going for heat. But, you know, and then wine, wine's at night and cannabis should be definitely at least when it's cooler. Yeah. Yeah, 100%. You know, and when the ideal time is it before the sun rises? Is it like in the evening? You know, I think there's some
for
testing.
Outdoor, what about for indoor?
Well, I think with indoor, it's like, you know, personally, it's like, you know, leaving the lights off for a little bit, like kind of, you know, day or so, try to get it cold. Yeah. You know, it's like, you know, and even if you don't have the lights off, even if you have like just the intensity of the heat down. Right. You know, I think kind of, cause it's trying to get right before harvest as much present. So when you're harvesting your peak terp and other trace volatile aromatic present, right? Because a lot of these, you know, because terpenes are the main aromatic compounds, right, present. But then there's hundreds of all these other
they're the largest molecule, right?
Yeah, they're in the highest amounts, right? Yeah. You could be 3 to 5.5% in dried flower. But then you have like all these other compounds that might completely total like 0.3%.
VSCs and you know, sulfur-based compounds.
Per billion,
it's like,
per you know, million levels of things.
These styles and abstracts did the white papers on the flavorants, and like these things are smaller molecules, but actually they're more intense and they add a lot more to the flavor than previously.
Exactly. Yeah, phenols, thiols, you know, aldehydes, you know, alcohol esters, flavonoids, right? And a lot of these compounds don't even make it past harvest, because of the temperature and you know, people are harvesting under, and the temperatures they're drying and curing under.
Sure.
You know, and so it's like, you know, a lot, you know, I feel like there's so many trace volatile aromatics, like even this, the gas smell, right? That's very sensitive.
Right.
That can go away so quickly.
Super volatile can go away if you treat it incorrectly, it goes away just like that.
But you know, it's interesting because like, you know, then in the same world, right? Like the abstracts use help to kind of document what they're calling Tropicana sulfur. Sure. Right. It's this sulfuric compounds that kind of make that
tropical sulfur compounds.
To make that tangy, forbidden fruit, mimosa, clementine, right? Sure. That smell, it can span terpene classes. Clementine's like terpenoline. You know, you got mimosa that's like caryophyllene, myrcene, more dessert. And then you got like traditional tangy, which is myrcene. Right. Which is, you know, so it's like fascinating how that smell can show through and really
myrcene, limonene, pinene, all in combination.
But then you're right. And you know, but that's what's really fascinating about that terpene to me. It's like to me, it doesn't seem like that. It's not terpene. That tropical sulfuric compound. I don't think those are very volatile. You know, because it's like that smell will stick around when a lot of the terps are gone.
Yeah, and it'll coat the bag. And if you have a bunch of cola, so we have the L3MON, the lemon, and that with SF Canna, and that one, if you put a cola of that in the bag with 10 other things, it's all going to smell like the lemon.
Right. Yeah. It kind of takes it over.
It'll literally take it over. But that smell a year later will still smell like it in the bag.
Totally. So I think it's one of those ones it's not a volatile trace aromatic. It's a super present trace aromatic that doesn't really go away.
More stabilized.
Yeah,
totally. What's your opinion on curing? We like terplocks. We've been working with terplocks on developing new ways to store our flour, but also cure in the bag where we're not burping.
Oh, cool. Yeah. I feel like, you know, I go back with curing. I go back to the hilarious failed experiment of the nitrogen packaged tuna cans.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Remember that? You know, it was so funny how much of a meme that was, you know, pre-meme almost.
Totally.
Where everybody was like at the same time adopting this tuna can.
Gotta have a tuna can. Gotta have a tuna can.
You know, nitrogen packaging tuna cans.
Ace in tuna cans.
People like did it for a year or so, and then pretty much everybody bailed on it at the same time.
Yeah.
You know, but that was a failed experiment.
I still have one in my freezer, and it's the Big Al's, the original Gushers.
Cool.
I still have it. It's in the tuna can.
Well, dude, you did it right. Because that's the thing. People would have like all their herb tuna canned up.
Yep.
Just sitting in their warehouse for a year, day to night fluctuations in temperature and humidity. And then like a year later, they would open a tuna can and it would be like, oh, that looks bomb. And then in 10 minutes, it like Benjamin Button reversed, gets old, whatever. It's like, you know, everything's gone. Totally. Like, it's almost like a cat, you know, time catches up to it. But it's like if you have that same can sitting in a fridge or a freezer, probably, you know, I mean, 6 months, 8 months later, you take that out. It's probably close to as fire as it was when it went in.
For sure.
You know, and so I think
even a year later, dude, like
you're right. Yeah, that's
like
what literally, I mean.
Yeah. I mean, year later, year and a half, 2 years,
that's what
you
I'm
can
saying,
preserve
dude.
this stuff.
Exactly.
I've been doing it for years.
Yeah. Cause I feel like there's there's more importance in the world of cold.
Yeah.
Maintaining like no temperature fluctuations and humidity fluctuations over, you know, cause you could get like, if you had a turkey bag, you know, like perfect fridge, you know, just like opened like once or twice through the year to take separate amounts out that you also keep in the fridge.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, you could shit on somebody's like herb that has this special packaging that hasn't been refrigerated.
Right.
You know, but then I think there is all this like advancement in packaging where self burping and, you know, these things that are really epic. Cause I think that takes out so much of cause, you know, either through things getting, you know, just the day to night warm, cold, and then not burping it enough.
Yeah.
And you know, it's just crazy how like, you could spend so much time and love and care growing the plant perfectly. And then in the last 2 weeks,
completely
full hay.
Completely ruin it. Completely ruin it. Well, you know, and I think we're making huge progress in the department of drying and curing.
Yeah.
We've been experimenting with the Canitrol, the Cure Pucks, but especially with Grove, we're working directly with Grove and their team on optimizing our cure. I think being able to have access to people like that is so great, because we want every detail to be perfect.
Totally. And if you have optimal packaging and you're doing the cold thing, it's like, I can imagine you're seeing some really cool the
quality's nuts. Yeah. And the quality's nuts. And then being able to store it for longer amounts of time. I think that's so important, especially with an oversaturated market.
Yeah. Big time. I think that's kind of one of the biggest things we learned from our, we've been operating a lab up in Oregon, just outside of Portland, in Tigard, since 2016, which is kind of right in the, we opened right around the flood.
Yeah.
Which was the pre-flood of California's flood.
Right.
And I feel like Oregon in a lot of ways is the canary in the coal mine of the cannabis space, because the farmers up there blew out the market quickest, right?
We had too many licenses, overproduction, too many licenses, all
which
that.
led to price compression and potency inflation among fraudulent labs, and everybody's running around with 50%. This was years before California.
Yeah.
And then it destroyed the whole market. And then fast forward a few years, then everything on the shelf is all just hyperinflated, but like less than 1% terps. So everything's just bammer. And a lot of the consumers lost, there's no brand loyalty, and there was a loss of consumer faith in the quality of the product on the shelves. And so, but what we've saw is the people that have built brands that have are withstanding the test of time, that are building resilience into their business models, instead of continuously doubling down on production, if anything, scaled back a bit and double down on terpene preservation infrastructure to treat it cold and to deliver it to the
Archive
consumer.
Genetics does a really good job with theirs. Archive up in Portland, they're killing it.
It's great.
Mother's Magnolia, another great one. It's like there's so many. There's a handful of good ones that I know of, and I'm sure there's more. There's a lot of boof up in Oregon, but then there's like some amazing cultivators.
Some of the best weed I've ever seen in my life comes
genetics
from Southern Oregon.
That's where we got our genetics back in the day. It was from Eugene.
Eugene. Big up Eugene. In just the whole Willamette Valley and kind of all that area down there. It's like, there's a lot of really good herb, but Ben, I think that's the biggest point, it's like, cause what we saw through the testing of Oregon, through the flood and collapse of the market, and California, where it's at right now in the middle of that, we're going to still be in for a while. It's like, like from the testing and the data, you see clearly this trend of terps, right? And the loss, right? And how because, I'm also an Emerald Cup judge, and, I've been for the last 6 or 7 years, and to, when we go through and test all the Emerald Cup entries, and then, there's this anonymous judging that takes place among a big group of, educated peers, and this whole deliberation process, once you go back through and you kind of analyze you can connect the strain name or the strain number to the name and the test results. Yeah. You can see that. So across all the data, you can see that, the top 20 judge pick winners, anonymous, tested individually, no correlation to the data or anything like that. You can always see that cannabinoid content has never had anything to do with what a judge picks as a winner. But when you look at the terpene content, it's the opposite. You can see clearly year after year that what the judges all kind of unify on and kind of emerges up to the top 20. Yeah. All has at least one standard deviation higher in terpene content, at least. Wow. Than the average, right? And so you can see that's more of a correlating factor towards what a judge is going to pick as the winner. And, just as a connoisseur that loves this plant, it's like, it all makes so much sense. Totally. If you have, I like to call a lot of the herb that's on retail shelves herbal distillate. Yeah. Because once all the aromatics are gone, right, in that window when it hasn't been taken care of for 30, 45 days, and it's on shelf and it's sitting at 1% or less, getting towards 0.5%, if you're sure, you could be 25, 30% cannabinoids or higher, but that's the cannabinoid terp ratio, you're getting to 100 to 1. Yeah. Right. That's what distillate is. Right. It's absent terps. That's a very THC driven bland high. Yeah. That's Marinol high, and I think it's not what people can desire. Right. No. But what you see, it's like these, and we saw these brands emerging in Oregon, that are really kind of proving this thesis, kind of what we've seen for the Ammo Cup and kind of even certain brands in California are doing. But, there's brands that sell out quicker than it's trimmed at the highest price the market can bear in the deepest flood.
Yeah.
And then through the deepest flood. And that's because they built like a grassroots consumer following, because when everything else on the shelf pretty much guaranteed is like 1% or less terp content in dried flower.
Yep.
And you have this one farm that's like 3 to 5.5% consistently, repeatedly every time on the shelf. That's hundreds of percent more sticky and flavorful than anything else on the shelf.
Right.
So it's like, and anytime I go to a shop, I'm going to buy that brand because I can see that.
Sure.
It's the clear standout. And, whether you're an Emerald Cup judge judging everything on the shelf or a consumer just looking for a good, because I feel like, a lot of the awareness of what we got from just the Emerald Cup judging, testing and sorting everything by flavor and aroma, where judges judge everything within their own smell classes, gas on gas, dessert on dessert, haze on haze, tropical floral against tropical floral, right? Sweet and dream against sweet and dream. It's like, once you have things presented that way, anybody, well, you don't have to be the like headiest connoisseur of cannabis. Yeah. Anybody could kind of, once you break it down in that way, where you have 5 Trainwreck, Jack, Sage, Durban, right? Any consumer can go through and choose which one's going to be the winner. Right. For the most part, you don't have to be a rocket scientist. Yep. To find this one's going to be the stickiest, stinkiest, most flavorful, and most bomb. And so I think kind of the future consumer is still being trained. Yeah. And I think it's such a big obligation. I think that the brands that really care about this craft designation have to really take internally into how they present and market their brand and their herb to the world. Yeah. Because there's no love right now, and everything's getting compared to the Budweiser. Sure. Oftentimes just inflated potency kind of subpar herb.
There's a lot of Budweiser out there.
A lot of Budweiser.
A lot of people are smoking Budweiser, unfortunately.
Yeah, totally. And, and I think, the more people become aware and educated around these topics, around kind of what really defines quality, and then also just like caring about the cleanliness of the herb, because that's one of the other really fascinating things that we've just learned over the years. I've now begun to predict regions where something was grown by the pesticides that are in the cannabis. Wow. Because you see these certain pesticides are indicative of the grapes, sure, in Sonoma, or the avocados in Carpinteria, the almonds in Stanislaus,
Well, that's part of the problem with outdoor is, you get pesticides from your neighbors, right? And stuff like that. It happens all the time.
I mean, not to throw any shade, but it's like, like those, the green bowl, right? Like, anywhere where you see prime ag designation in California, the green zones for agriculture, right, those are the red zones for cannabis. Yeah. We started to kind of work on a project, kind of hasn't really gone far around this. Yeah. But, essentially, the more rotational ag with the more crops in an area, the worse it is to try to grow cannabis. Because it's like, if you're surrounded by rotational farmers planting different things across different times of year, spraying different concoctions of fungicides and pesticides, and then they got their Roundup in there too, kind of, it's like,
well, and cannabis is the most heavily tested form of agriculture out there. Oh yeah. So it's way different than everything else. So there's a lot of stuff that goes through. Oh yeah. With everything else, gets tested for cannabis, will fail. Oh, dude, that's been kind of the most, observing and analyzing the data over the years. It's kind of really like activated a passion in my life around kind of just organic agriculture and regenerative agricultural systems and the slow food movement and moving away from what this other system's done. Because I'm an anthropologist. Study of all people at all times and all places, and ethnobotany is another passion, which is the study of the traditional plants used, cultures have used across time and space. And through the lens of testing cannabis, because I'm not a chemist, I'm not in the lab doing the testing. I'm kind of more on the cannabis front end side of things, relations. But, through the lens of testing, it's like, to me, cannabis is such a profound plant, because it's like testing is helping to provide a language and meaning, so we can understand and interpret this plant for all the wonder that it offers, so we can be more precise in how we use it effectively for the range of, cannabinoids that can treat different conditions and cancers, and, the different terpenes, so we can like modulate the range of effects, right? And flavors with, all these other trace compounds, right? And then on the testing, because now that we're testing cannabis to a level nothing's ever been tested in history, and it's this hyper accumulator of this century. And it's just starting to kind of get further like
legalized
Yeah.
across the nation, I feel like it's a really important plant to help us to kind of learn, because through the lens of testing, it's helping to uproot the story and the legacy of the Green Revolution.
Right.
And what's happened, what we've done to the land after World War II, repurposing all this nerve agent Nazi technology to kill and gas people to now become the modern pesticides and fungicides of the future that we're applying to agriculture, microdosing the planet, microdosing all life species on the planet, including the microbiome of our gut.
Yeah.
Leading to like the chronic disease epidemic we're faced with.
Yeah. We both have ulcerative colitis. Dude. It's like one of those things that.
Yeah. And how much glyphosate is connected to that. And it's on all the wheat and grain and the grocery stores in the middle aisles. It's like, I feel like cannabis is almost helping to bring this to the surface so we can kind of expose this contradiction. Yeah. It's like, cause we're now like all like hyped about how clean the cannabis is, but then you're eating the Big Mac. And you're eating the like poison.
Well, I'm not, but I know what you mean.
Totally. Yeah, I just mean like people.
People in general and awareness.
But I feel like the cannabis plant helps us to activate. It's like that contradiction where it's like, what else is poisoned in my life? Maybe I should eat organic. Maybe I should make better choices when I'm putting in around my body.
Well, I think awareness is coming. I think there's people like us that are aware. There's people like a lot of our viewers that are aware of what's going on and what's good with cannabis and what's bad with it. But it's an immature market, and a lot of people are new to cannabis, so they don't even understand a lot of the things. They think it's like alcohol or tobacco. You just go buy whatever and it gets you high, and it's like it's so much more than that.
So much more, so much more complex. Yeah. And it is fascinating too, just with the whole, because a lot of regions like Napa. Have fought tooth and nail, and all the wine growers, like in Bonnie Doon, which is a historic kind of cultivation region, Appalachian in Santa Cruz for decades.
Right.
It's crushed right now, right? Because how powerful the wine lobby has been. Yeah. Similar to the Napa Valley, to kind of block cannabis from having any way to come in, because it'll expose their reality, right? Yeah. Like it turns out Napa is one of the most toxic Appalachians in the fucking nation.
Right.
Because like not only are they just bombing all the bifenazate and like myclobutanol and trifoxystrobin and all the fungicides and pesticides, right, that are also used in cannabis or have historically been used that aren't allowed to be used on cannabis. But they're also spraying all the Roundup, right? Because you go see the acres and acres of grapes and there's not a single weed.
Yeah, it's all super clean.
Super clean. Yeah. Super clean. And as a result, like, there was an environmental working group did a study where they tested all the wine, or they were tested, not all, but they had a sample set, they tested and had like 100% of the wine tested, even the organic ones from California all had glyphosate at some level, And so it kind of is one of those things.
Hamel is one of the ones there in Sonoma. But I know their stuff does not test for glyphosates.
That's good.
I had this conversation with them when I was there about 2 years ago. Dude. But it's wild, but it's very rare, because even you're going to get blowover from your neighbor's property too. It's, that's the biggest problem. Even with glyphosate, it's like.
Totally. Well, have you heard of URIC? It's like an EPA organic or National Organic Program EPA exemption. Yeah. It's called UREC. Mm-hmm. Unavoidable residual environmental contamination. Right. Like that is a really gnarly acronym. Mm-hmm. Right. And it's basically because if you're an organic certified farm and you're 360 degrees surrounded by conventional farms that are spraying different things at different times. Yeah. Right. It's like, how do you stay organic? Right. And so basically the National Organic Program created this exemption where as long as your organic crop has less than 5% of the EPA allowed level of that pesticide on that crop, it can still pass in the market as organic. But as a result, 30% of all organic produce is now kind of detectable pesticides, right? Not just not super high levels compared to all the conventional, right? And so it's a really fascinating thing, but where cannabis is planted, it's almost like they done fucked up. Right. Because it establishes itself as like a transparency beacon into the community practices. Right. Because it's like, boom, planted. And now you're bing, 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 failing for all these different pesticides. Right. And so, kind of just as a fascinating trend. Right. So in Santa Barbara County, Carpinteria, kind of all around there, where the avocados are grown, through and even further down in San Diego County. Right. There's a company called Crop Protection Services, CPS. Yeah. They're one of the largest resellers of all the big ag chemicals fertilizers,
CPS scares a lot of people, but Child Protective Services, Crop Protective Services,
Crop
the same
Protection
acronym.
Services, CPS.
Yes.
Yeah. So Crop Protection Services, they sell all the big ag chemicals to the farmers and all the pesticides, all the anti-life agents.
Yeah.
And then they also have a department that for a yearly fee, you as a farmer of whatever crop, they'll come out and spray your crop with the allotted need of fungicides and pesticides and herbicides, right? For a yearly fee. They don't give a shit. They're just having somebody drag a tank over so they can just blast your neighborhood, whatever time of day. They're not following, there's this federal law called FIFRA. It's the Federal Insecticide, Rodenticide, Fungicide Act. And it's the federal act at which all state pesticide regulations are established to uphold FIFRA. Like, so pesticides, people have to get pesticide use or pesticide applicator licenses and all these things, right? To like learn and be within the guidelines of FIFRA.
Right.
Nobody follows FIFRA. Nobody has historically until cannabis came about, right? Followed FIFRA because it's like very specific on stipulating times of day, wind conditions, all these things that you can spray these anti-life chemicals.
Yeah.
Before cannabis, right, and even right now with cannabis, you see people dive bombing pesticides out of airplanes and helicopters. That's illegal. That's an illegal act, right? That's done like completely with and no regard to FIFRA, to any of the details around spraying to avoid drift from
crop dusting.
Yeah, because you're straight crop dusting, right? And so. It doesn't matter if the school district is down the way or all the homes have their windows open, right? People are just dive bombing because out of economic convenience, right? Because it's more cost effective for a farmer to have somebody bomb 100 pounds of glyphosate or whatever, right? Like some type of pesticide or fungicide out of a plane than, to have to go and, just have somebody spray it with PPE on. Right. And so it's crazy how they do that, like out of economic convenience. But anyway, so it's really kind of nefarious at a certain level. But anyway, so Crop Protection Services had 80% of the contracts with the avocado farmers in Carpinteria in Santa Barbara County. Yeah. And as a result of like the hyper increase in crop insurance claims from cannabis farmers suing neighbors because their spraying practices are creating massive expensive fails for cannabis flower. Yeah. It's actively forcing reform within agriculture, right? And Crop Protection Services chose a few years back to cancel all contracts with all avocado farmers. Wow. Because they don't want to take on the liability of possibly getting sued because their spraying affected the cannabis farm neighboring. Wow. Right. So now the farmers have taken they have to spray on their own kind of, volition, right? If taking the accountability on, right, of like what and when they're going to spray, right? So it's really interesting to see that, and and also aerial spraying out of helicopters and planes in those regions, in cannabis growing regions, is drastically reducing as well. Huge reductions in those types of spraying practices because cannabis is like the new sheriff in the town, almost like kind of like holding kind of the other agriculture accountable in a way. It's like. Pretty cool.
It's a good thing for sure.
It gives me a lot of optimism because if there's integrity in the testing model as this goes national, you can't just flip a 1,000-acre mega farm growing genetically modified corn that's been like an active bombing range for the last like 30 years on the soil. You can't just flip it and grow hemp, right? No. Or grow cannabis, right?
Not unless you're using it as a bioremediator to clean the soil.
No, exactly. You grow like because that's where, and I think that's a huge conversation too. Like the word sorcery and magic, right? Around what is hemp. Cannabis, but and just like same plant, right? And it's like, and most people in the hemp world, they do not grow industrial hemp, fibrous hemp, right? They're growing like type 3 cannabis, right? Like high CBD, low THC, resin, but like indistinguishable from cannabis, right? Like type 1 or type 2 cannabis, which are like big bud producing, resin producing drug cultivars. Yeah.
Well, the type 3 is exactly the same, but it's high CBD.
Yeah, exactly. And it's able to, under this legal definition, it's able to pass under it as hemp. Yeah. So everybody started just growing massive amounts of cannabis flowers, but type 3. Yeah. But then it was like, oh, we can get away with THCA, right? THCA hemp. And so, so that's just, it's just,
this loophole was wild, right?
It was wild, and good on people being able to, because everybody's got to survive.
Accessibility is important.
Accessibility is important, but I also know like the dirtiest product in the state of California is never stayed in the state. It's always gone in east.
It goes in the hemp.
It goes
it goes in as hemp,
it goes
or
into
whatever.
hemp fucking market. And it's like, and
well, the oversight, again, there's not a lot of oversight in on that side of it, as far as people are putting shitty products. They're making shitty Delta 8 with their CBD,
totally.
all this stuff. And there's not a lot of oversight. And that's where the problem is like a lot of stuff isn't tested, and then it gets consumed by people that think they're getting a clean product.
Yeah, totally. You know, but to that idea, right? If you have 1,000-acre mega farm, it's like if you actually went and grew industrial hemp to bioremediate, phytoremediate the land, you know, and get your neighbors to start cleaning up their zones. It's like maybe one day down the line you can grow some drug cultivars, right? But until then, go grow rope, right? Like
totally,
you know, because cannabis can be used as a strategic or, you know, national or global resource if we used it effectively for the range of what it offers, you know, and, you know, to help kind of, you know, so many other industries, right? Like I love like the work that Winona LaDuke is doing in, you know, the Pine Ridge Reservation in Minnesota, you know, to, you know, kind of actually grow industrial fibrous hemp, you know, because she's trying to disrupt the cotton industry, right? And how much water goes into growing cotton.
Totally.
Right?
We need it. We need people growing hemp for hempcrete, right?
Yeah,
Hempcrete, all these type 5 cultivars, right? As far as chemotypes, we need people growing type 5s. We need rope. We should get more rope, more textiles, all these things.
And that shouldn't be tested. I mean, sure, it makes total sense. It's like, it doesn't need to be tested, right? It's like, I mean, maybe I feel like it's almost like depending on the contaminants, what can it be used for, right? Because it's like how dirty the land is. It's like, well, in the future, maybe it can't go into the fiber production for, you know, clothing or something. I mean, there's always going to be like organic versus synthetic or conventional. But, you know, it's like, I feel like certain cases, right, of contamination might be best for rope or for sails, right? Versus this other like fiber that's, you know, more ideal for hempcrete, you know, and building materials. Cause, you know, just thinking about like the whole, if you have like all of the pylon in your hempcrete, then just off gassing more, you know, it's like, that's probably not the best use of that fiber for that product.
Well,
you know,
it depends on the residual and how much it's testing. Parts per billion, parts per million.
Totally,
like what is it testing at, and what's a safe level, or
and if
is there a safe level?
Locking it in, right? You know, but yeah, it's like I feel like if it's going to human consumption or animal consumption, right? For medicinal wellness purposes, right? For the medical community, that's, you know, largely forgotten since legalization, it's like kind of part of our obligation to kind of be clean and to not, you know, because there's a lot of efforts too on the national hemp effort, like big ag, big nefarious corporate companies that are, you know, trying to scale back testing regulations to be more like food, right? But it's not about stooping to their low. It's about holding them to a new high.
Well, and I think awareness is important, and also transparency. Like with these like there should be transparency with this stuff. It shouldn't just be put out on the market and people can consume it without the option of them knowing what's going in. You know, there's a reason we have stuff listed on the food that we eat, even though it's not totally accurate either. Right. No, I'm 100%. But I think there needs to be more transparency across the board with everything, with the FDA and everybody else.
I agree. Well, and I feel like the future is in radical transparency. Yeah. Right. For consumers to have trust in the products they're buying. Yeah. Right. Whether it's a beauty product or a food product or a wellness medicinal product, right? Like you see so much, like just even in the world of dietary supplements where, you know, people are actively subscribing and buying kind of things like ashwagandha or like whatever type of dietary supplement that then turns out to not even be that, right? Yeah. And so it's about like finding those suppliers that are doing the diligence to kind of actually have the purity of the product they're getting behind represented and third-party tested to demonstrate that and to show that it's clean.
One of the biggest ones is pink Himalayan sea salt. There's a lot of fake pink Himalayan sea salt out there.
Honey even.
Yeah, honey too. Honey's another one.
Cut with like all the Chinese corn syrup.
Yeah.
Glyphosate, all the things, you know.
Totally.
Yes.
And a lot of people are consuming this stuff. And I think the more there's people out there that are aware of it, that can share the information, the better off we all are. Yeah. I mean, I think education is so important and
so
us to be able to understand it.
And I feel like that's such an important thing that the cannabis plant is here to bring the world, right? It's helping to reveal. It's like a plant that's helping to reveal and bring these things to the surface so we can kind of like understand what are we eating? You know, it's like, why do we have this chronic disease epidemic where like now 1 in, you know, I think 115 boys in California are now born with autism from 1 in 30,000.
Right.
Kind of 20 years ago. It's like there's
something
you
going
just
on.
see this thing and you see the whole Robert Kennedy Make America Healthy Again thing and trying to kind of cut the head off the agrochemical and pharmaceutical control over the EPA and the FDA, right? Like they're finding that like 8 out of $10, funding any politician on the left or right on the local level, the state level, or the federal level is from either the big ag or the agrochemical, like pharmaceutical, or agrochemical or pharmaceutical.
Right.
And that's like Bayer, Monsanto and Bayer, right? Like that's kind of the people making the pesticides, making us sick, and the pharmaceutical companies making the pills to make us better, right? Where it's like, there's something deeper underlying here and how we can, kind of restore the health of the soil of the nation.
We're in this beautiful time with technology. We have this technology in our hands, AI and all these technologies to really understand, and accessibility to knowledge and information. And I think awareness is just so key with all this stuff and being able to like research and look into it. We're in this beautiful time with this stuff, and it's, but I think some people are just ignorant and some people are okay with ignorance. They'd rather be ignorant.
Ignorance
and that's
is bliss
okay
in
too.
certain ways. But as like we're seeing kind of close people in our life getting sick earlier.
If you have kids, wouldn't you want your kids to have the healthiest, healthiest experience on this planet as possible?
Yeah, no, exactly right. And oftentimes, I can speak from my own personal experience and it sounds like you can as well. It's like having an autoimmune disease.
Yeah.
Like I was saying before we started, it's like in my early 20s coming down with ulcerative colitis and having this like internal immense suffering and pain.
Yeah.
And kind of like I thought I was cursed, but what I learned is that was the greatest gift that I was served early in my life, because the path I was on was like a pre-diabetic kind of path of like long-term chronic illness. Yeah. Not getting any better, only getting worse. Right. And there's this Ayurvedic quote that I kind of live by now. It's when diet is in order, medicine is of no need.
Yeah.
When diet is out of order, medicine is of no use. And so it's like those daily choices of things we put in or on our body. It's like, and how much over time that can affect us in a way that can be so far gone to even be able to pull back from.
Right.
But it's like in my early 20s to learn and to start this path of radical health and to learn, to become sugar-free, grain-free, gluten-free, organic, right?
Yeah.
Vast majority, right? I'm not like really that crazy militant and kind of, annoying about it, but it's like, we have to be able to do as good as we can, because it's like, going to any restaurant, all the seed oils and all the, there's so much, so it's like, you can only do as good as you can do, but by making a choice, by becoming educated and making choices, it's like, it's only going to pay dividends for our longevity in life so that we can be around our families and our kids and enjoy life into our elder age and through the ceremony of death, not going through the misery of dying because all the choices you made leading up to that point, actually poisoning yourself across the way,
Right. Yeah, we live in an interesting time. It's pretty wild. It's really beautiful, and you got to count your blessings. I think there's a lot of people suffering right now, but I try to take in each day as a blessing. Wake up, knowing that we're just blessed to be alive in the present. Yeah, it's pretty wild.
Big time. It's a very heavy time on this planet right now. Clearly, and that's also where like a lot of these. I feel like cannabis is like this emerging historically prohibited plant that's here, like bringing in this new time and new era on this earth, while everything's happening of like the heaviest consequence. And I feel like it's helping lead the way for all these other ancient sacred medicines that are prohibited, that are having their way into this new world too. And I feel like they all have these other gifts. I feel like so much of those gifts are helping us to learn how to be right and be present, and to shine light in this world, in this world of darkness, this time we're in, because there's already so much.
Half of his presence. I think half of living in reality is being in the present.
Yeah. Not being anxious about the future or dwelling on the past, or anxious about the future, but being present and also just like your actions, it's like, how do you talk to people? It's like, I've been learning this a lot just with my work with some of these ceremonial plants and, just like how powerful just your energy and intention goes, and it's like, you're driving through traffic, somebody cuts you off and you get super road rage and you're flipping them off and screaming at them. You don't know if that person's on their way to go kill themselves.
Yeah.
You don't have any idea what that person's going through, and then you just like doing something to try to push them over the edge. It's like, through any moment, through your word or your in energy, you could be sending a prayer or a curse into the universe.
Yeah.
Well,
karma's a real thing. And I think we all need a little bit more empathy, especially now with the way things are going in this day and age. Empathy is important. I think I'm more empathetic than the people around me a lot of times, but I've gone through a lot too. I've suffered, and you never know what the next person's going through. So empathy can be a good thing.
Totally. Yeah. I think it's one of the biggest things, compassion, empathy, kind of, and just like cultivating those, things in your life, right? Of like even forgiveness, right? For people that have done you wrong, and how much that liberates you spiritually, right? In life, to kind of be more empathetic and compassionate and be able to cultivate happiness and joy, right?
When you manifest things, you manifest good things, you manifest bad things. So I feel like if you're trying to be positive all the time, you're going to manifest positivity. And if you're negative all the time, you're manifesting negativity. And so like there's
I think literally.
It's great, literally. And I try to live by those things, and I try to remind myself daily. I think,
respect.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like the herb and also like psychedelics, these things can, open the doors of creativity, but also they can remind you how important the present is and the people around you. And
oh yeah. Yeah. This finite time we have in the world, and that's where, I just have so much gratitude for cannabis in my life, and how much it's blessed me, and how much I couldn't imagine who I would be, or what I would become over the last 15 years had I not kind of met Tim Blake and had Taylor Blake not blessed me up, because actually I was on a trajectory to be, I had a shared goal with Taylor to move to California.
Yeah.
She wanted to move back because she was like 10 years detached from her dad, because in the 90s he got busted in Santa Cruz for going indoor by the feds, and and family separated, and the mom took the kids and moved to the East Coast, and then that's where kind of they ended up growing up. And so when I met her, us having that shared goal, but I wanted to go to SoCal. I wanted to move to like Redondo Beach area where in South LA, where my older brother lives. Cause I wanted to follow in his footsteps and, go work for the military industrial complex.
Wow.
I was going to go like use the GI Bill, go to Cal State Long Beach. That was my goal, 23 years old and fresh out of the Navy, it's going to go GI Bill, study electrical engineering and, go work for like Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman type vibes,
Sure.
and, for just so grateful to have met this plan for like Tim Blake to like, turn me on, right? Yeah. Because it's like I shifted my life service away from the military industrial complex to plants and people.
Yeah.
And it's just like how much that's, this plant's really just enriched my life with like, the ability to be happy and joyful and to kind of, be able to make that choice of, how to show up in this world and being present and compassionate, empathetic, and and big ups too to like, those, the giants whose shoulders we're standing on, who kind of really paved the way in the world, in the way of medical, kind of the medical cannabis movement, like Valerie Corral, Mike Corral, Wham, Dennis Perone, right? Like, I'm on the board of Wham, and Valerie's one of my great spirit mentors and teachers as well. And, just to kind of understand the work that they did to help get us to where we're at, cause in this time where it was this complete prohibited plant, no love for this plant, it's like it was in the early 90s, groups like Wham and Dennis Perone were giving free cannabis away, this abundance producing plant, giving it for free to the sick and the poor and the dying, the marginalized and the forgotten. Right. Like the wasting AIDS patients on the steps of City Hall in San Francisco. Right. Yeah. And it was that act of compassion, right, that kind of created this state conversation around, wait, cannabis is medical, has medical value.
How is it illegal?
How is it illegal? And so that created such a compelling, like generous philanthropic kind of movement around, the Compassionate Use Act of 1996 that defined medical cannabis, that helped create this global movement that's happening now, and And to this day, it's crazy because once the legalization happened, because everybody for that whole time, the glory era, from Prop 215 to legalization, there were, a lot of people, kind of a majority of people were, really showed their, they were using the words, right, of compassion and caregiver, right, to really, hustle herb, right,
Sure.
Cool, whatever, but but it's crazy because once legalization happened, you saw a lot of colors come out, because everybody, it was kind of mind blowing how quickly compassion was bailed on.
Yeah, they went to adult use right away. Yeah,
unanimously across it was actually illegal for a while to do any compassion, right? And so it's just really fascinating, kind of how that happened, because I still believe that act, that philanthropic, compassionate act of giving, still to this day, one of the most radical aspects about cannabis,
right?
And I think it's kind of. It was one of the most revolutionary, radical acts that's ever happened to help free this plant, right? And it's actually really interesting. It's kind of a bit of a side note, but the history of the religious and medical use of ayahuasca in Brazil, right? A very, very similar parallel story with what's happened with cannabis, right? Because for 10,000 years longer, ayahuasca, gets to the root of the word medicine. To the etymology of the word medicine, and tribes for millennia have used this plant, this blend of these two plants, like this sacred brew, a medicine of many names, right? Because of how old it goes across so many tribes in the Amazon, and this medicine historically was a cherished cultural treasure that wasn't really shared with outsiders, right? And there was a long time where it was not just used to heal internally the community, but it was used to curse, right? Like sorcery, use it to hunt, to kill, to there's a lot of uses for it, you know? But kind of, it was in the early 1920s, in this time, really kind of a lot of the beginning of contact with a lot of the tribes in the Amazon, not a good time either. All the rubber and enslaving a lot of the tribes and preventing them from speaking their languages or practicing their cultures or drinking their medicines, right? But there was this man, his name is Irineu. And this man, he was a 7-foot tall black man that was first generation Brazilian, enslaved from Nigeria, and his parents. So he was born in Brazil, but his parents kind of were enslaved, and he was descendants of Nigerian royalty, a royal family from Nigeria that was enslaved and brought to Brazil, and then they were involved in the rubber industry. And Irineu was born, and he's in his early 20s, in the early 1920s, and he's kind of he had just got out of the military, and he's kind of going through this little mission. I'm not exact sure on the details if it had to do with rubber or what else it was, but this man just cruising through the Amazon jungle, and he comes across this legendary Page, leader of the Ashaninka people, like the 7,000-year unbroken lineage, right? Never conquered. Right. It turns out to be the grandfather of the current leader of the Ashaninka. This Banki Piaku is the leader of the Ashaninka currently, but his grandfather was this man, this grandmaster Jedi, shaman, spiritual leader of the Ashaninka people, that basically just cruising through the jungle, Irineu rolls by him. They never seen a man like this man. And, they couldn't connect or talk, right? But the Ashaninka kind of brought Irineu in and shared this sacred brew, which the Ashaninka people call kamarambe, and shared kamarambe with Irineu, and Irineu began this process of transformation, right? And he ends up doing this 10-year apprenticeship, doing the plant diets and all this training with the Ashaninka. Wow. And it was in this apprenticeship that he receives this transmission and download of the doctrine of what is now known as the Santo Daime. Santo Daime, it's one of the two first recognized churches, religious churches that serve ayahuasca in Brazil, right? Because for the longest time too, Brazil. Sorry, this is turning into a longer story.
That's okay. No, this is great.
For the longest time, Brazil has been very hyper racist towards the indigenous. And so So basically, in this moment where Ideneu is in this apprenticeship, and he receives this transmission of the doctrine of this religious movement known as the Santo Daime, part of the mandate of the download was to bring this medicine out of the jungle and to the city to serve the sick and the poor.
Wow.
Right? He received that message to do that. So that became part of the mission. So he basically goes and starts Santo Daime Church, kind of somewhere near a city in Brazil, right? Outside of the jungle. And he begins, basically this movement. And Santo Daime has now grown to like a community of like over 50,000 people globally. And it's brought ayahuasca to all corners of the globe with active churches in like Japan and, everywhere, right? There's lots of, and so a lot of people's first understanding of ayahuasca came from Santo Daime, right? And anyway, long story short, it's like the work of the Daimistas, right? Who are also known as the soldiers of the Queen of the Forest. But bringing this medicine to the cities to serve the sick and the poor, that kind of it opened the Brazilian imagination in a similar way to what happened in California with cannabis.
Wow.
Right? To the fact that the indigenous brought something to the table, that they weren't just these savages, right? And that sparked this movement to create a religious exemption for this medicine. Yeah. Under the act of compassion and empathy to the sick and the poor, right?
Really cool.
And so yeah, I think kind of cannabis, really paved the way for cannabis, right? And it actually turns out that this whole ayahuasca movement happened, decades and decades, right? Like 70 years before cannabis. But it's just so fascinating to me, that similar parallel path, right? And I just think there's something in that kind of act of building businesses and models, that give back as well as kind of take, right? Is kind of more of a radical thing than to build a brand just to make money. Sure. And I think it's always going to kind of, come back around and I agree.
And one thing I loved about our industry was the community that almost got lost. Yeah. Right. And I feel like because we've suffered so much, we're going back to this community. Right. And I feel like the community is becoming stronger than ever before. And it's just a beautiful thing. It's like we were really community based with medical in the beginning. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, we were talking about rec and we're talking about adult use cannabis. They're getting rid of the medical. They're getting rid of the community. Now it's just a commodity. And because all these cultivators and even breeders and everybody else is suffering, we realize that collaboration and community is so important. Yeah. Right. And so tough times make strong, good people. I feel like. Oh yeah.
I feel like resilience,
resilience. There's something to be said for tough times.
Totally. And, I feel like, it's one thing the cannabis plant has taught, so many people. It's like how to be able to handle chaos. Yeah. And like drive through it with as much composure as you can. Right. To not get busted or not, all the things that, came along the way.
And sometimes it's just one foot in front of the other. You just gotta put your blinders on and know that you're going the right path and just keep going forward. And totally. It's all about conviction sometimes.
Yeah, totally. And, and I also think, it's like as far fucked as so much of the time has been with the legalization experiment and how much so many of the most legendary farmers and legacy producers that have ever existed, or, a lot of them not even in the game anymore, and kind of over it. Yeah. It's been really devastating to see that. But I also do believe that there's going to be multiple opportunities to come back and to stake the claim, right? To what, I feel like they helped to pave, right? Because as we see, like the corporations didn't figure it out. And a lot of them aren't even in the game anymore. Some of the biggest corporations.
The biggest ones are gone, right? Yeah, not all the way gone.
I don't want to say the names.
Yeah, but some of the biggest ones are completely gone.
Like, lost $800 million and chose to, because of that loss, close doors in California, Oregon, and Colorado, the three most established and competitive markets in the nation. What does that say? Right. Right. And that's most of the corporations, so it's like a lot of people came in. I feel like this plant at a minimum commands humility, right? And respect.
It'll humble you real quick.
Oh, yeah. And I feel like, it's like just face plant. Like, and so I feel like the more hubris you come in with thinking you're just going to crush it and make money, commoditize this plant, put out the stoners, is proportional to how quick you face plant. Right. And just to see that happen, not just in California, but pretty much in every state, you know, because we're now operating in like
the world
5
now.
states.
Yeah,
and
in the world even.
to see, I mean, this is, I feel like the plan's got a bigger plan, you know, honestly, and who is allowed to steward it, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think it's about getting right with the, you know, your intentions and kind of what, you know, you're doing and to make, you know, the right choices and, you know, it sucks that a lot of people did all that and made the right choices and kind of got clobbered, you know, from like the corporate effort come in, the wave that just crashed, you know, but again, they're not here anymore either. Right. So who are the people that are going to stay? And you see, it's like, you know, you go to a lot of these like real good, you know, events that have been historically really good. You don't see a whole lot of the corporate people there anymore.
Even
you know,
MJ Biz was dead this year at the convention. Yeah, I love MJ. I did a dinner party. We had a lot of fun. It was great. Oh yeah, I got a letter for you right here.
Cool. Thank you.
But yeah, I think MJ, it wasn't as big. You know, it's a sign of the times. And I love Las Vegas for meeting my friends from all around the world. You know, we all get together, we do these fun things, and I enjoy the dinner parties. I think MJ still has a potential. Right. But they have to change their model. They have to wake up and look at what's going on and change their model, and they can still be successful. Yeah. But I'm more excited about Germany, about Mary Jane. Mary Jane's going to be wild.
Oh, cool.
You know, same thing with Argentina, Brazil, Chile. Like there's some amazing events. Same thing, Prague. I heard Prague was amazing this year. And, you know, I'm looking at stuff on a global scale as well.
I've actually never, you know, cannabis has kept me pretty like grounded ball and chain vibes over the last 15 years. I did actually go down to Costa Rica once, you know, participate in this like press conference with Valerie Corral talking about medical cannabis. There was a moment where they were considering, you know, bringing it medical, but I think that's what's really interesting because, you know, I've been like living vicariously through a lot of my friends' kind of just paths, you know, and it's been really, it's because I feel like so much of the fun and the passion that so many of the legends of this game had, right, kind of has been drained, right, in this moment with California cannabis and just the bloodbath that it's been, and so it's been sad to see the fun get sucked out of the room, in such a big way.
People are jaded these days, right here, but in other places they're not as jaded.
Totally. And you see those people go to some of these other places, and just to see that like total. You know,
I love that about Europe.
Lust for life back, you know, and like, because it's also like, that's what's really fascinating to me too, because it's like these European countries, because I feel like everywhere you go outside of California is like 10 years at least behind, if not way more than the awareness around cannabis. And so it's like, and to really know this plant, you know, in ways of cultivation and integrated pest management and breeding, cultivation, you know, it's like all these things of, you know, I feel like that awareness it's not gone, you know, and to be able to, you know, help, you know, bring that awareness to other areas where, you know, the fun can be resparked, and I'm excited to see that. And I just really hope, you know, ultimately I think kind of, you know, and it's not to kind of bring anything back to testing, because it sounds very self-serving of me, but I think kind of if the federal government is, you know, learns lessons of California and the fail of it, you know, the things that were done wrong by state regulators, right. And, you know, puts in place, you know, because when you put in place testing regulations in a regulated market, that creates testing as a final check in the integrity of the supply chain. Right. And if there's not integrity in that step, you might as well not even have the entire system there, because everything's going to find its way through the cracks. Right. And everything's going to be hyperinflated. Right. All the mislabeled, highly inflated potency, all the kind of contaminants are going to make their way through. And, you know, it's going to, you know, but, you know, California finally, you know, realized, you know, because it was part of their whole system. Like they were had picked up lessons from Colorado and Oregon and how to do it right. And in my opinion, certain things around the testing they did do right. Yeah. And part of that was going to be their state labs, right, which they now have one online with the University of San Diego and one up in Hayward, actually. Right. And so, but they put they came online 5 years late, right? After the fraudulence blew out the market, right? Because there's this 5-year place where you had the dirtiest and the cleanest in the state competing on the same price point to extinction. Yeah. And the most bomb and the most like craft bomb and the most corporate bammer competing on the same price point to extinction. Because guess what? Everybody gets whatever number they want. Yeah. Everything's clean. It's wild. So it contributed to the collapse. 100%. Right. But honestly, it's like, as this goes national, it's like, again, you can't just flip 1,000-acre mega farm. Like the big ag farmers can't grow cannabis. They can't even compete, right, in the space, right? It's like, because it's like the land they're sitting on is not a gold mine. It's like it's a landmine field, right? Because of all the choices and the spraying practices going back last decades.
There's a lot of remediation that happens.
That needs to happen, right? In order for like, them to be able to get, but that's where I think if there's actual solid regulations for testing as this goes now federal,
right,
for anything that's going to be consumed by humans or animals, right? Whether it's CBD or THC or whatever, right?
Sure.
I think kind of that's almost that's the barrier of entry, right? To where it's like, if you can't, because I just believe that, those types of guardrails are going to prevent big ag, big tobacco, big pharmaceutical, big,
right,
big chemical, right, from even having a chance, right? They can't even compete.
Sure.
So, yeah.
So what is the highest testing, like as far as COAs, what's the highest testing flower you've ever seen?
Testing for terps, testing for cannabis?
For both.
Okay.
For cannabinoids?
Yeah. So with cannabinoids, first off, you have to take into account that all reported values in California are dry weight corrected.
Yep.
Right. Part of the regulations, they have to be dry weight corrected, accounting for full decarboxylation.
Yeah.
Right. So whenever you get like total THC value, right, or total, it's.
And you guys use GC.
So no, HPLC. Yeah, high performance liquid
yeah.
chromatography for all cannabinoid content, gas chromatography with FID, flame ionization detection for all terpene content,
terpenes.
right?
Okay.
And then LCGC for mass specs, or LCGC with mass specs for all the pesticides and solvent testing, stuff like that. But yeah, so all the cannabinoid values, they're being so the average herb, right? When it's ideally dried cured, 8 to 12%, right? 8's a little dry, but 8 to 12% is kind of the ideal range. So 8 to 12% of the weight is removed for the values that are reported. So the values are already kind of marked up.
Yeah.
Right. So, because it's like, if you tested a plant like as is in this 8 to 12% range, it might be 25%. And then whenever the dry weight correction happens, it's now 28%. Right. So there's already this boost everybody's getting, from.
Is that the difference from 15 years ago when you first started testing?
Yeah, that's one of the big differences. That's one of the big differences for sure.
Makes sense.
Yeah, one of the biggest.
But
differences.
also drying it out more. They're drying it out more in addition to.
Yeah, totally. Right. Yeah, because it's like removing all the water weight. Yeah. So it's just max potency values, right? So anyway, with that being said, we have seen certain strains, right? Like, again, because I think there's these ranges, right? There are strains in that 30 to 40 range, right? Especially with the dry weight correction values, right? Yeah. And we have seen certain strains, right? Like that banana OG going back to when we opened in 2010.
Yeah.
But also, these strains like GMO, I hate that name.
Yeah.
It's funny. It's
Me too.
Funny
it's a
name.
great cultivar, shitty name.
Totally.
But
but it's funny name to garlic mushroom onion cookies. It's like, okay, I guess GMO is better. But anyway, that's one of those strains where you could test a top bud and it could hit and break 40%.
Yeah.
Right. Now, does the average on the compliance test that? Way less than the market thinks those types of numbers exist. Right. We see a very small percentage of people hit those numbers because for one, they have the genetics, and two, they're doing methodical leafing to where they're able to kind of remove and max potency values across all buds on the plant. Right. So anyway, with that being said, we've seen probably, 42, 43-ish kind of in that range, kind of total THC.
Total THC.
Total THC. Wow. Yeah.
Really cool.
Totally. And, but the average is, across what we test is in the 20 range.
Like 23, 24.
23, 24. Yeah. Nice. Yeah, totally. But again, like there's those genetics that you can hit on a top bud.
Right.
Those types of breaking 30 numbers. But typically those types of strains are capped in terps.
Right.
Right. Like those, oftentimes I don't think we've ever seen one of those high producing cannabinoid strains hit or break above 4% terps.
Wow.
Right. Ever.
Yeah.
Even 3.5%. Like,
interesting.
Yeah. But then there's this, because that's where we work with breeders, kind of on like early leaf testing.
Sure.
For cannabinoid and terpene content. Because from, if you test 10, early plants and the leaf for cannabinoid content, you can see, okay, 0.6% THCA, 0.7% THCA, 0.6% THCA, 1.2% THCA. So you can see which one's going to overall be the higher performer in cannabinoid content. So you can do those early selections around that. And then with terpene testing, you can see of the offspring from that cross, you know, which are going to be more like the terpenylene mom or the myrcene dad, right? So you can see those early picks. You're not going to see how high those produce in terpenes, but you can see at least which direction it's going to go as far as smell. But yeah, like, you know, I think, you know, a lot of people will they'll do the terpene or the selection on cannabinoids because they're just trying to find the highest producers, right? To kind of just constantly be pulling those. But we have some breeders that will kind of take all the strains to end and in a very controlled way harvest, dry cure, and then kind of measure terps and then kind of do selection also based on that. Because it's through that type of practice that you can find in the, you know, 15% to 30% range. You can find, whoa, that one just produced 5.5% terps. Yeah. You know? And so it's like, I feel like that's just such a underutilized selection tool for breeding because people are just so fixated on cannabinoid potency, right? And it's really sad because, you know, there were some like amazing strains like Purple Kush and like Bubba. Yeah. 388, right?
The real Bubba really back in the day.
18, 19%. Yeah. But again, like, you know, some of those Bubbas, you could hit like 4 or 5% terps. Like, what's that? That's a 3-to-1 cannab to terp ratio. Like 3-to-1 cannab to terp, as opposed to like even a 30% strain that's at best 3%. That's a 10-to-1. Yeah. Right. Which one's going to hit you harder? Right. So it sucks that the focus is so much on THC and that because it's really, and you know, people are talking about terps, but it's like the grand total, right? It's the ratio of them to each other.
Well, not all terps are created equal. Some are a lot stronger than others. So it's like, you know, you look at limonene, how potent that is.
Totally. Yeah, totally. And, you know, and certain ones like terpenylene, terpenylene, it's like even if it's not the dominant terpene, if it's there in like 20, 30% of the amount, it smells like a train wreck.
Yeah, right? It's funny how you perceive it.
It takes over that smell, right?
It doesn't totally, the percentage of each one doesn't necessarily dictate the interpretation by your body and the intensity.
Totally. And, you know, and even like ossamine, right? Ossamine, like is like
I love ossamine.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
I absolutely love
like,
ossamine.
Dude, pineapple Thai, like that was like one of the all time. I haven't seen that in super long
Mark
time.
from Green Shock, one ossamine. His stuff is crazy.
Mark, dude, the passion orange guava, the tropical sleigh ride.
Yeah. Double Lantern, the Frank Hill this year, Double Lantern. I liked Double Lantern a little better last year, I think.
Awesome.
But he's awesome. Yeah, I mean his pheno hunting is incredible too. Like the stuff where he got 300 different phenos of all stuff that burns your nose.
Yeah, he's like I like to call him the ossamine king.
Yes,
you know, and then you got like I like to jokingly refer to the Essentia dudes, if you know Ben and Marley, like they're like the terpenylene kings. Yeah, you know, because those dudes found and selected, you know, because and terpenylene is actually an interesting one because. You know, because first off, I was going to say ossamine is similar to terpenylene. Yeah. Even if it's not dominant, if it's there in like 20%, it still takes over, right? Because because if you look at like pineapple, like in the pines, or like, or even like things like Dream Queen, green crack, right? Like super high myrcene, a little bit of ossamine, right?
Nitrous oxide beef jerky. That's green crack.
Nice.
That's my interpretation of it for sure. And
totally, that's funny. But you know, but you know, it's interesting because so the Essentia dudes, they selected phenos like of the terpenylene category that kind of what I was saying earlier about like things that break 30%. Yeah, not being capped in terps. There's something in the terpenylene world where that might not be the case because they have like multiple selections, like. Wow. You know, kind of like, I want to say like Buddha's Hands one and like Honeydew, Maracuya. Like there's a few, but like, they're ones that they've entered the Emerald Cup and the State Fair, like going back last like 6-7 years and multiple times just swept kind of and crushed, you know, all with like, you know, with their genetics kind of hitting numbers that are like, all their entries are pretty much at least 1% or so higher than a lot of the, other entries, Right. So it's just really interesting to see kind of, because that's kind of what I oftentimes will talk to farmers about too. It's like diversify your portfolio.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, sure, the only thing that sells in the bulk market is propaganda gas, right? But that's like, dude, that like the bulk market's largely dominated by the East Coast buyers, right? So most of that herb and the price that people are getting in the bulk market it's like it's kept us in the Stone Age, because the trend of the propaganda gas being awesome was California like 5-7 years ago or whatever. Right. And I feel like we're stuck to where now 80% of what's on shelves is all propaganda gas in California.
Totally.
And it's almost like 70-80% of what anybody grew this year.
Right.
So it's so crazy, because it's like, if that's all you grew this year, slight variations of the same smell, Skittles by Skittles Gelato crosses.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, sure, there's slight differences, but in a mass of all the market herb, and the retailers looking at it, it's like
most of it's genetically identical too.
Oh, most of it's genetically identical. It's
so
homogenous. It's worked to homogenize,
right? Yeah,
and it create this lack of a loss of biodiversity.
Totally,
right? And that's what's crazy, because it's like BDS Analytics and Leafly Data. They found that even though that dessert profile, the like caryophyllene limonene, it dominates what's on the retail shelves in California. They found in certain regions of the state, you know, you have terpenylene, right, which, you know, only represents like less than 10% of what's on the retail shelf. And oftentimes bulk buyers are allergic to that terp. And if they see it, they're like, leave you. They don't even want to look at anything else. They're like, you're done.
Yeah.
You know, even though, but that's what's crazy is like the BDS Analytics, Leafly Data have shown certain regions, whenever terpenylene is around and on shelves, and a good example, it moves 5 to 8 times as quick as anything else on the shelf till it's gone. In these certain areas, because of how big there's a following and how lacking it is in the presence in the market. So when somebody finds it and it's good, they go buy it all, you know?
Budgelero, they do the sour diesel, but he goes only 14 to 22 week typically. And their stuff is the definition of sativa, where, you know,
oh, cool.
It's all awesome stuff.
Oh man. Yeah. Well, I mean, that type of the gas sativa, you know, cause my favorite zones, cause we're all very different, you know, and I think it's about honoring the range of unique consumer experience.
Sure.
Because what smells great to me might not to you, right? We all have very different endocannabinoid systems, right? And like, you know, for certain people, the taste of cilantro is soapy. Yeah. Right? They hate it, right? Or the taste of cacao, chocolate, terrible because of how bitter it is, right?
Sure.
But it's like others, it's not, right? And so, you know, because I learned this myself as a judge in the Emerald Cup. You know, I remember the first year I was judging, I could see that who was loudest, you know, in their opinion and their bullying would kind of have a way on swaying what other judges would vote for. Right.
Totally makes sense.
And, you know, so then it's like, oh, dude, it can't be this way. So it's like, that's when we developed this system, you know, where we kind of were able to leverage just what we've learned from the terp data, you know, over time. And, you know, we tested and grouped everything kind of, and then it gets anonymized and then given to the judges. And then you know, everything comes in its pre-sorted smell classes. So it's like everything with you know, I 1 through 100's indoor, S 1 through 100, right? Sun grown. And then there'd be a purple sticker, and that's all the myrcene, right? So like blueberry, cherry AK, right? GDP, purple Urkel, right? You know, things like that. And then there'd be the gas on gas, dessert on dessert, haze on haze, tropical floral on tropical floral. And then whenever, because it's great whenever you do it that way, because then for one, you're like, oh, wow, the desserts, there's like 100 of these. Yeah. And oh, wow, there's 10 of these jacks. Oh, there's, you know, 8 of these, you know, tropical and florals, right? So you can see the classes that, you know, kind of are really underrepresented.
For sure.
Right. And that's for one thing. It's like, dude, like if the dispensary market is anything resemblant of what the entries in the Emerald Cup look like, you know, it's like if all you grew is dessert, like Skittles by Gelato crosses, and 100 entries in the Emerald Cup of 150 were that. Yeah. It's like, it's going to be really hard to differentiate your herb unless it's like double terp than the average, right? Because of how well you dried and cured it. Right. You know, but that's where it's like, oh, but if you're entering these other, you know, classes, right, that are not as highly populated, right, you can also have a way of standing out quicker and easier. Right. And being able to actually compete kind of heads up on the merits of the herb. Right. You know? and you're not getting drowned out by like just the number game.
Sure.
Right. And so anyway, so I think kind of it's just one of those things where I think the more the retailers kind of start presenting, because we've seen some of the more progressive retailers around kind of that will adopt this system and then sort their menus in this way, where a consumer comes in and then they have a shelf that like, or they'll have like, you go in and there's like a sensory station where you smell like a train wreck, you smell a sour diesel, you smell a granddaddy purple, you smell a pineapple Thai.
Get the sensory experience.
Yeah. And then you're like, oh, I really want to see this pineapple Thai. So then you go to the tropical floral menu, and the hash and the flower are all that prevailing terp.
Totally.
Right. And so, cause then from there, it's like also as a judge of a cup or as a consumer, you don't see 100 jars, right? You're able to smell 5 or 10 strains where you're like, oh, wow, this one is the one. Right.
Sure.
And you can actually subjectively judge it to the highest like judging criteria, and without having to be a high level sommelier, still do a really good job in being able to pick what would otherwise be picked.
Makes total sense.
But
yeah, it's wild. Judging the competitions. I'm working with True Terpenes right now on some projects. We just did a caviar and Kush tasting where you get a big bump of caviar, and then I made this aromatic, basically the spray with ethanol, where you could get the cranberry Kush. So it's like a full sensory experience where you get this salty, sweet caviar, and then you get this cranberry Kush that's very subtle.
Oh, cool.
I went super subtle with it to where it just like complemented the caviar. But yeah, and then we're working on some different combinations together to create some interesting profiles for future events.
Are cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, I love the diversity with the stuff they're doing, and they're doing everything. So they've got like the mono terps, and then they've got the plant derived cannabis terps, and I love the fact that they're kind of pushing boundaries in that direction. Yeah,
totally. Yeah, I feel like that's been really interesting to see the rise of the butterscotch blasted like spliff, or joints, kind of, and I feel like in a big way, there's the market for those types of terps came up because of how absent the natural terps were in the average herb being bought at retail shelf.
Totally.
Right. And, because when everything on the shelf as a pre-roll is like 0.5% or less, it's like, that's cardboard.
Right.
Every time you buy
that's
one,
why infused joints are so popular.
Exactly. So if you're able to give it a little juice and a little butterscotch flavor, appeal to the jewel generation,
right?
You can like come up, but I think it's a bit. There's you can do both, right? And because I think personally, 10 out of 10 times choose like 3.5 to 5% terp, perfectly cured, dried, preserved, sticky.
Right.
Herb, over like a butterscotch flavor joint or something,
Totally. For sure.
But I'll puff it. But that's one of the things I think that's so important, because like a lot of the flavor houses that like make these blends, of either cannabis derived, botanically derived, or synthetic. Yeah. There's a lot like that's what's so crazy about testing cannabis in final form. Right. Because that's a big difference from California and Oregon. Because up in Oregon, like if you make a product like a topical or an edible. Chocolate, right? You test the cannabis ingredients through this whole process to make sure they're clean. And then when you formulate and make the chocolate, when you go to retest it for compliance, because it's going to market, you only have to test it for potency. To verify that your dosage is hitting
equivalent to the range, right?
Exactly. But in California, the final product form is tested for compliance. So all of a sudden, through the final form testing chocolate, all of a sudden we start failing all kinds of cadmium.
Wow!
Right? It turns out it's coming in from the cacao.
Wow!
Right? Or
crazy,
right? Because it turns out cacao is a phytoremediator of cadmium, and when it's planted around mountains like in the Andes of South America, then it's got a high level of cadmium, and so the higher the percentage of dark chocolate, the higher the presence of cacao. Or excuse me, cadmium.
Cadmium,
right? And so, since California has like these, strict limits, right? Like I think it's 0.2 ppm. It's like cannabis people had to realize this and start cleaning up their supply chain, right? Because it's all these other ingredients besides cannabis that can bring in the contamination, and we see, because when it comes to terpenes, like botanically derived, like lemon extracted, right? It's like or cannabis extracted, right?
Sure.
The terpene extraction is a super concentrated extract of the plant's essence,
Mm-hmm.
where a vast majority of whatever pesticides present are there.
Wow.
They all carry over to the terpene fraction
Makes
predominantly.
sense. Yeah.
Like whenever you do the diamond mining process,
Sure.
you do live resin extraction, you have the pour off.
Yeah.
It's still got some gas. You cap it. So you put it back in the low heat, and it kind of the solvent just further kind of boiling off the residual butane.
Yeah.
But then the terpenes act as a separation solvent to basically purify the diamonds.
Yeah.
And pure THCA, up to 98, 99%. Really high percentage.
Right.
And then all the terpenes, and some of the THC kind of goes into the terpene fraction.
Sure.
And so, but so in that process, if you have like 5 pesticides at pretty high levels, you can essentially purify them out of the diamond through that process. And then they're all captured in the HTE,
Nice.
or the botanically derived lemon.
Sure.
Right. Because it's like, that's what's crazy about like lemon, it's citrus, right?
Mm-hmm.
Organic, or like that's why organic citrus is really important, because like citrus is highly sprayed with category 1 pesticide, chlorpyrifos.
Mm-hmm.
And chlorpyrifos finally got banned in California because, the developmental cognitive deformations or development delays, and kind of damage that was done to like children of farm workers.
Wow.
In California. And so it took so fucking long just to get the state, even though this awareness was coming pretty front and center.
Yeah.
But California finally took the hint and banned it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like currently sprayed on citrus all over Florida. Right?
Crazy.
Right. So the, it's one of those things where, if you're working with essential oils of any plant, right?
Sure.
Like you think about that whole movement of essential oils and people are putting them all over their face and they're drinking water. It's like,
how safe is
some of those have like 5+ part per million of different chemicals, right?
Wow.
So
wild.
Yeah. Well,
so what's the highest amount of terpenes you've seen in a cultivar? That was a 1.
So 3 to 5.5%. Right.
So nothing above 5.5% through SC.
I mean, we haven't really seen. I mean, I'm sure we could. I mean, I've heard like certain people like Mark Lewis, if you know who Mark Lewis is, he's like, because he has had some really sophisticated testing he's done internally with his company over the years and stuff too. And I've heard like numbers that break 6%.
Yeah, 6.7.
I've heard. So I've heard there that's possible. Like those, because I also think that with terpenes, it also matters the way it's grown. Yeah. Right. Because it's like, I think certain, like before we opened the lab, I got really into agroecology and like soil systems, Elaine Ingham, soil food web, right? Yeah. Teaming with microbes, right? And then like, she's shown kind of, whenever you have the right fungal bacterial ratios in the soil, you can track compared to conventionally grown, hydroponically grown of that plant. You can track the doubling of the secondary metabolites that plant produces, repeatedly across all these crops with certain vitamins, or lycopene content in tomatoes, certain vitamins in certain berries. Right. But I think genetically plants have a certain potential of what they can produce that probably similar to cannabinoids, that certain plants might be able to produce higher levels of terps over others. But then I think there's the component of cultivation that's almost an extra kicker, where any plant might be able to produce a boosted amount based on the cultivation technique and method. Right. Right. Nice. Yeah. I almost feel like, cause there's lots of ways to grow this plant, but I think through, cause if you know who Elaine Ingham is, yeah, she created the soil food web. Right. And she was a relatively unknown microbiologist that became like a saint in the world of organic farming and regenerative farming because of cannabis farmers that were trying to learn how to do it more optimally and ideally organically. Yeah. And cause she created the word compost tea, right? So that whole kind of the awareness around, teaming with beneficial microorganisms to kind of, like that really kind of came on her back, carrying that message out and cannabis farmers idolizing that, kind of helping get kind of some of that information out there. But, nice. It's interesting though, just through kind of that research. And I think it's almost, helping to show just like, or substantiate, possibly like, I think we'll be able to almost through our love and focus on cannabis and growing it perfectly. I think we'll be able to, as a community, we'll be able to almost substantiate like why organic produce is better than conventional produce.
Sure.
In the fact that it's more nutrient dense or packed with phytonutrients or,
right.
types of things. But
so if you had one piece of advice for your younger self, what would that advice be?
One, like learn another language or two.
Yeah.
Early on, which is just side one. But then two, it's like create better daily habits, around kind of organization and collection of thoughts and, kind of note taking. There's aspects of my life that are very unorganized as a result of not being able to be a really like dedicated daily note taker and keeper and organizer.
Yeah.
My partners over the years kind of, I think it was more of a heckle, but they call me Captain Chaos.
Nice.
So
yeah, I've been trying to live
pull
by
together, over the years.
I've been trying to live by results equal consistency of vision plus consistency divided by distractions.
Oh, that's beautifully put.
That's what I've been trying to live by lately.
Say it again.
So it's results equal consistency of vision plus consistency
of action. Yeah.
Divided by distractions.
Fuck.
It's a good one. It's like,
dude, I want to write that down.
Yeah.
That's truth. That's absolute truth. And it's taken me a long time to learn that. And it's still such a hard thing to kind of.
Yeah. If you say that to yourself about 10 times every day when you wake up, you'll go through the day.
I love that.
Yeah. I feel like consistency is so important, but also clarity of vision, like of what we're doing, like being very crystal clear on what you're doing. Totally. The more crystal clear you are, the more consistent you are with that, I feel like, and the less distractions you have, the more results you're going to get. And I didn't make that up.
Yeah.
I read that and it just stuck with me right away. So
I appreciate that. No, that's
I feel like we're in line with a lot of the same stuff. So it's been a great podcast.
Yeah, I really appreciate this opportunity. Yeah, big respect.
For sure. Thank you. And if people are looking to find out more about Alec, where's the best place to go?
_ SC Labs. Also my personal kind of IG is CB Dizzle.
Yeah.
And www.sclabs.com. And we also have like some videos and stuff on YouTube, but I got Instagram where we have some different videos, we're doing kind of putting out just awareness, around different topics.
Yeah. So, really cool.
Yeah, right on. It's been a pleasure though.
Dude,
Thank you. I really appreciate this opportunity. It's amazing just to see, that epic quote you just said, kind of, I could see how much being a breeder.
Yeah.
How much, that is going to either help you to critically succeed or fail.
Yeah.
Because of how organized, you got to be, and just the labeling and the tracking and kind of all those things. It's
all the details. It's all in the details.
All the details. Yeah. Amazing. But definitely really, appreciate this relationship and opportunity to be here speaking with you and the world that you present to. Big respect, Joe.
Thank you. Thank you to our sponsors. Thank you guys very much for your support. Thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe down below.